Podcast. We've got a special guest today. It's always fun reconnecting with an old friend through the show. We've got Allan Gungormez, who has been a friend of mine and an industry colleague, probably going on for 15 years. We both started working together back when I was a young man in my 20s, and so excited to see how Allan's career has continued to progress. Allan is a brand strategist, a social culture expert in Los Angeles, California, and he's the Chief Strategy Officer of Modern Logic, MDRN Logic, a premier creative agency and strategy studio that specializes in social-first branding, internet culture, and entertainment marketing for global brands like Adobe, Crocs, Manscaped, Bad Bunny, and FX and PlayStation. Before working alongside founder Erica Coates, Allan spent over a decade leading strategy and creative direction for high-profile agencies. Allan, thanks, man. Welcome to the show. Good to reconnect with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been a long time since 2012 or something like that.
I know. It's great, crazy, man. Time flies. Well, I know we got to reminisce on some of the old work that we did back in the day, but I know I gave a little bit of a background there, but why don't you take the viewers back to the beginning? So where'd you grow up? What'd you study? And how did you find yourself in agency land where we first met?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm born and raised in Southern California, Chatsworth, California. And I actually went to school. So, I mean, I have a Middle Eastern upbringing. So my parents were wanting me to be a lawyer or a doctor. I let them down on both fronts there, but I tried. I went to college originally as an organic chemistry major, and quickly found out that I was terrible at any advanced math. So we abandoned that plan pretty quick, and I was like, I'll be a lawyer. So I was an English literature major, and while I was in school, I got a part-time job at a coupon agency, and maybe that's dating me a little bit, but hey, like it was like the end tail of coupons. Coupons still exist.
Sure.
But I was writing coupon copy for like nail salons and dry cleaners and Indian restaurants and stuff like that. And I had a boss who was like, your copy's pretty clever. Like it's actually pretty fun to read, and the customers like it. You could probably go do this for real someplace. And he had a friend who worked over at a real agency, and I went and I showed my coupons, and they were like, hey, coupons, that's cool and all, but you got to start thinking about the internet. So they said, take some time, go try to figure some things out. And I went home and I came up with this arbitrary goal. I was gonna start a blog, and
Nice.
I thought to myself, if I could get 100,000 people to come to my blog, whenever that happens, I'm gonna go back to them and be like, look at this thing that I did. So I started a blog about underground hip hop music and street art.
Let's go.
And in about 4 months of just consistently writing and doing it, was getting somewhere between like 70 to 90,000 visitors.
Crazy.
And honestly, it was like early days of like Reddit, Dig, Stumble Upon, posting things on Twitter, finding the right forums, and it started to just pick up a lot of traction. And I remember I even had record labels like reaching out like, oh, will you cover this mixtape and stuff like that. Or I was going out at 3 a.m. and following street artists on the street and taking photos for exclusives on the blog. It was a lot of fun, but it was really funny. It was just, the goal was to get into
it was literally just a portfolio project, huh?
Yeah, so once I was able to do it, I went back and they were like, oh, this is great. And that's how I got in, and 16 years later I never left. So
that's amazing, man. I love that story. So how long have you been with Modern Logic, and what was the drive to come over as the Chief Strategy Officer?
Yeah, I've been with Modern Logic. We've officially been up and running publicly since January, but I've been there since late October. It was a really exciting opportunity. I felt like, my partner in crime, Erica, and I, we had been talking about wanting to do something that we could really build from the ground up with a lot of, the learnings that we've had from over the years that we were spending together and beforehand, to really kind of figure out a way to have strategy be at the forefront and really move at the speed and scale that we knew the industry was going on. And I think what we found was a lot of times when you're at places that were built on a foundation that wasn't necessarily for social or the internet, it's hard to sort of adapt it and change everyone to want to move at that speed, or fix the infrastructure itself. So the chance to do what we're doing now is just too exciting to pass up.
I love it. And how did you meet Erica? Tell me a little bit about your guys' relationship over the years.
Yeah, so Erica and I met over at Mocean a little over 6 years ago now. Well, I guess it's
Wow.
almost 7 years ago now. And we just hit it off. I think it's one of those things where we have really complementary skill sets. And I think we know how to make each other's lives easier in that sense, which is always super helpful. And I think we have a really nice flow of I really respect and understand what she does, and she really respects and understands what I do, and it kind of allows both of us to thrive in our own thing, and we can both appreciate what that looks like.
Very cool. All right, so we'll get into the questions a little bit. So you recently wrote a case study, a white paper, whatever you want to call it, the death of the follower and the algorithmic reality. I think, whether it's creator culture or brands, everybody, the playing field has been leveled in a lot of ways, and the algorithm gets a vote now. So it doesn't matter how many followers you have. Most of the audience that you're reaching through earned is done through, how good is your individual video, and can that video find an audience? And, the same can be said of the paid strategy. A lot of times if your content isn't good enough to find an audience organically, then, you're going to have to figure out how to buy that audience in order to get your content in front of the right person, even your own followers. So just want to see if you could maybe bring us up to speed on where you think we are in the organic social ecosystem, and what does that mean for the clients that you guys are advising today?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting place to be. I feel like there's such a wide variety of conversations just based off of different partners. I would say level of understanding of where social and the internet is right now, and just content in general. We definitely are still talking to some people where that follower metric is important. There's people that we talk to who in their investor meetings on a quarterly basis, they have to report on follower growth of social channels. As crazy as that sounds,
Is that a vanity metric, do you think? Is it just to be able to, like you said, either report to their investors or have some type of a benchmark of how their brand is growing on social? Why do you think that continues to be important when it has less and less effect on the outcome which they're looking for, which is distribution?
I think the interesting thing to think about here is, like, I feel like, everyone is always looking for what is that one number we can report on, right? What is that KPI that matters? And I think that, like, everyone's always looking to replace one number with another number. And follower count used to be a proxy for distribution, right? You used to be like, hey, we have this many people can potentially see it. But we see now that today distribution is really happening on like a post by post level, right? So, what we really try to tell people is, instead of asking, okay, what's the new follower count metric? It's more, are our ideas actually traveling, right?
I love that.
Them? Are they talking about them without us, right? That's always an important one. We don't want to have to start the conversation. Are they taking ours and starting other conversations with it? Do we see creators taking a format that we've created, and are they doing something with it? Are journalists writing about these brands? Are these ending up in group chats? We talk about group chats all the time, right? So
Yeah, what do they call that? Dark social.
yeah, kind of, right. So I mean, like, to us, like, it's not just like one metric, right? It's a whole bunch of different signs that show that your content escaped your own audience, right? And
Mm.
I think like what we say internally is, our KPI isn't really about reach anymore. It's did the idea develop a life of its own, right? Did it have the ability to just go beyond the post?
I love that. Is that harder to measure? Followers is such a succinct, like, oh man, I've got this particular, metric that I can benchmark, and it's so easy to like measure. But you're talking about a lot of things that are maybe a little bit less measurable, right? Like format, if a brand does something and then it becomes a trending sound or something that people want to copy,
Yeah.
but they're adding it to their own unique style and feel. Like, how do you measure kind of the escape velocity of conversations outside of the brand's own channels? Is there a way to quantify that for clients?
You know, there is. I feel like the simple answer is you can measure it. It just takes more effort. You
Got
know,
it.
I think like every platform out there quickly reports your follower count and growth, right? But this just takes a little bit more manual work, right? You kind of have to dig through things. You have to be pretty plugged in. You have to understand that you have to go a few levels below the surface in your searches and your monitoring. I don't necessarily know if there's any one tool out there that I would say is fantastic over the others. There's a lot of tools that I'm seeing that help track any visual mention of your brand or things like that. No one that I would give my stamp. Hey, that's what you should get. But it just takes more work to do it. But you totally can, and it actually really paints more of an interesting picture. And there's always a lot of things that you can end up sort of finding in that discovery that helps lead to other ideas as well.
So you've talked a lot about creating content that aligns with hyper-specific online subcultures. How do you identify subcultures? How do you find ones that are big enough where you can earn a share of voice in and have influence, but then be big enough to scale?
I think probably we start one step back and we try to think about where does it make sense for our brand partner to actually participate in, or where are they already being talked about in interesting ways? I don't think we ever want to try to find a subculture that doesn't make sense. I also think the idea of a subculture in this day and age is totally different, right? Like subcultures used to have time to marinate. It was kind of an underground thing. There was like value in the proximity of the source, but social has sort of like put that on like a speed run, where they don't necessarily have the time to sort of. You don't have the VHS tapes of skate culture or the underground music or anything. It's not like that anymore, right? It's on TikTok, it's a million of views. It's getting spread all over the place. So we really see the idea of subculture get like ramped up to the nth degree in speed, and it's sort of understanding, well, does my brand have a logical place in that subculture, or can we actually add value to their conversation in a way where it makes sense for us to show up, or are we just trying to tack into something that makes absolutely no sense for us?
We met originally because we were working on a project together that was kind of rooted in Hollywood storytelling techniques. And that's been a big through line in your career, is creating content that's worth watching versus interrupting people's attention span to get to the content that they want to get to. That Uncle Drew campaign took elements of like, Jackass and reality TV and, getting people dressed up and transforming them through special effects and costumes, and then it eventually became a feature-length television, a feature-length film, all starting with a brand campaign. You guys have done work with complex B2B and tech platforms such as Frame.io and Workday. How do you keep that entertainment-first marketing strategy forefront when kind of trying to translate to complex B2B topics?
Yeah, I would say I don't think B2B needs to become entertainment. I think that
Interesting.
I think that it needs to become interesting, right? And I feel like
I
there's a
like that.
big difference then, right? So I think that like the mistake a lot of enterprise B2B brands make is copying the surface level characteristics of entertainment. They think that means jokes or faster edits or more memes. But really, what I feel like Hollywood and gaming and streaming, what they understand really well is things like tension and curiosity, characters, stakes, and progress. And I wouldn't necessarily say that those things are entertainment techniques. I think they're more human communication techniques. Because if you're launching a workflow product, you don't really need to make it feel like Marvel, right? But you probably do need to tell a better story than a feature list. And I feel like in feeds these days, people aren't really separating, B2B and B2C content when they're scrolling, right? I mean, everyone's competing for the same attention. I would say the bar isn't really like good for enterprise or good for B2B. It's simply is it interesting enough to earn 10 seconds, right? Can you keep someone's attention for that long because you've mastered a lot of those human communication techniques, not just entertainment.
You've also advocated for treating social media as a real-time focus group. Can you unpack that a little bit? How do you, how are you migrating from the idea of, putting 10 or 20 customers in a room and talking to them, face to face, and translating that type of a research or insights function to social? And now there's even this new concept of like synthetic audiences and using AI as your focus group. So be curious how you've seen that evolve from, rooms and surveys to social media to now maybe the idea of a synthetic audience.
I would say as a lifelong professional strategist, I love a focus group, and I love talking to people. I love knowing what it is they like. And I think there's something really interesting about social where you will find some of the most unfiltered versions or opinions of what people are actually thinking about. I think when I think of social as a focus group, I do broaden it out beyond just, the standard platforms and the comment sections on YouTube. I'm a big fan of, I'll go into the Amazon reviews. Have you ever read Amazon reviews for things? I mean, there's really interesting things that people have to say, super specific aspects of a product that they're thinking about. Of course, you're looking on Reddit, or a lot of times you can even find, Discord groups about certain topics that you can go in and see what people are saying about a product. There's so much you can learn from people talking unprompted about a product or a brand or a competitor that can lead to so many very interesting insights that provide ripe creative territories for either, creative solutions or business solutions. I personally, I haven't used any of the AI synthetic focus groups or anything like that. My gut says I still love hearing from real people when it comes to that. And, I'm not someone that's like, AI has no place anywhere. But I do think that there are, plenty of areas where, at least for now, I would much rather take the time and see what the real people are saying rather than the synthetic.
Yeah, and human insights change when people are posting them publicly with their name attached to it, versus like in in an internet environment where you can be more anonymous, such as like
Yeah.
X or YouTube comments or Reddit threads. I think you get a different type of answer, and especially if people are like in a room where they aren't being, filmed or photographed, and it's not going to escape out into the wild.
Yeah.
I was going back to this idea of follower account being irrelevant, but I'm also cognizant that it's been the major measurement of the creator economy for over the 10 years that I've worked in it, at least. Do we need a new way of structuring influencer deals? How do we value a creator and what they bring to the table? How do we create a formula that honors a creator and what they've built, but also takes into consideration this new reality?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I feel like maybe one of the biggest mistakes I see brands make are when they hire creators for their audience instead of their creativity. I think a lot of times what we see are brands, they already know what they want the video to look like, and if that's the case, like, why did you go out and you hire a creator?
Yeah, should have hired a production company, right?
Exactly, right. I mean, I think a lot of times, the brief that they're taking to them shouldn't necessarily prescribe the content, right? It should mainly just say what the problem is. I think we see a lot of brands that say things like, hey, we want them to say these 5 things. But a much better way to go about it is, hey, we want people to feel this way, or we want people curious about these specific things. And I think the creators that have the ability to translate those brand needs will find ways to make themselves significantly more valuable than others that rely just on follower count, because the creators do, at the end of the day, know how to communicate with their audience better than the brands do always, right? So it's really about if you're giving them the opportunity to do that, can they do it? And then the ones that are really good at doing that, I think, will be the ones that will kind of rise to the top in the creator world.
So you've made a sharp distinction between cultural relevance and cultural resonance. To the average brand executive, those sound a little bit like agency buzzwords. What's the practical, tactical difference between a campaign that's merely relevant versus one that generates resonance and drives outcomes?
Yeah. Okay. So I teach this in my class at USC too. Everyone always
let's go.
So I always say relevance is when people understand what you did, and then resonance is when they care enough to do something with it. Every brand can make Backrooms or Odyssey posts the week a movie comes out, right? I think that's relevance, right? But resonance is when people are voluntarily sharing your version because it says something about them. It's interesting because the algorithm rewards engagement, but people reward meaning. And that second one is much harder to get, and that's what you get with a resonance.
I love that.
Yeah.
Whether it's Manscaped or Crocs, modern Logic has mastered a very specific tone of internet native, self-aware storytelling. How do you pitch a risky legacy brand on embracing weird community-first creative without triggering their legal and brand safety alarms?
Yeah. I'd say we probably almost never pitch weird, but we almost always pitch human behavior. So if a community is already talking in a certain way about your brand, I would say that's not risky. Actually, ignoring it is risky.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think, the one thing the internet is really good at, and I would say this, I'm stealing this from my longtime coworker, James Kobo. The internet is really good at developing its own language. So our job isn't to invent a new language; it's to translate the internet's language for brands. I'm never asking a bank to become Duolingo, but I might be asking them to participate in culture in a way that feels authentic to them and right to them. And I think that's the difference, right? What's the actual human behavior? I think one of my favorite stories that I have is we did a a really awesome campaign for PlayStation a while back for God of War that featured Ben Stiller, LeBron. It was a ton of fun. But the original brief that came to us was looking for something that felt like Dove Real Beauty campaign, super emotional,
Wow.
super felt heartstrings, and it was actually our very first time working with PlayStation at that time. And it's always interesting when on your very first time you want to go against the brief. But when we just looked into how the internet was talking about the property, it was memes, it was sarcasm, it was jokes, it was a very serious game, serious storyline, but the internet wasn't taking it that way. So not being aware would have made it feel, I think, just foreign to the audience, or like, oh,
Mm.
they don't get us, right? And I think the fact that we were able to, have partners over at PlayStation that were so open to seeing things in a different way allowed us to come up with something that really worked.
Yeah, it's a great insight. The your audience gets a vote, right, of what your brand tone
Yeah.
is and your brand voice is. You may set out wanting to accomplish a specific thing, but your fans and followers might take it in a different direction. I remember when we worked on the Jeep business, we couldn't post anything but a Wrangler on the Jeep feed, or we'd have like anarchy.
Yep.
So we had to create different social feeds for all the other product lines, because like, nope, the Jeep feed is the Cherokee community, and that's it. Sorry, that's what it's become. So, all right. Social feeds are getting completely inundated with AI generated content and brand noise. If everyone is pumping out more and more content, how do you approach creative differentiation so a client's campaign can interrupt with like just so much content? The vault, I heard like 50,000 new YouTube channels a day right now because of AI.
Jeez.
Like, how does volume, kind of create, this inability to break through, and what can brands do about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's safe to say we're definitely not suffering from a content shortage.
Hmm.
But I do think that we're probably suffering from an idea shortage. I don't really think that brands are competing against AI or AI content. I think they're competing against creators who actually have something to say. Because I think, more assets, more volume doesn't necessarily fix average ideas. Uh,
Mm.
so I feel like really it's about um, having good ideas and taking the time to bring them to life in ways that people actually want to engage with. Yeah.
So, um, we've heard endless talks at industry panels about community building, but sitting in your chair leading strategy for some of the most visible brands in the world, what is the single biggest mistake that brands are making on social when they're trying to build a community? Is it, trying to build a community around something that doesn't necessarily need one? Does every brand need a community? I think there's a difference between community building and social.
So I would say there's too many brands out there that are still treating social like it's a publishing platform. It's not, right? We like talking about it as if it's a participation platform.
I love
The,
that.
the goal isn't to post, the goal is to create something people want to carry forward. And honestly, that's really what the death of the follower report really was about, right? The internet isn't really rewarding the brands with the biggest audiences the way that it used to, right? It's really rewarding the brands whose ideas keep moving and keep traveling. If you just think about the last thing you shared with a friend, right? You probably, at least I know I wasn't, you probably weren't following the account that made it.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Right. So I
Hmm.
think for us, it's like we really try to think about like this idea of like community first creative. Um, because I kind of think the internet's become really good at ignoring things that feel like marketing. Right. So the more that it feels like that, the less chance you have that it's going to travel.
So I always hate it when clients come to me, or I imagine you, wanting a campaign that goes viral. They're usually thinking about luck or buying the reach. But I do feel like there's elements, I think back to Uncle Drew and some of the other work in the early days of like trying to get earned media on YouTube. There are creative architectures that, whether it's the hook, the pacing, the subculture alignment, that make a video systematically feed friendly, kind of like what you're talking about, that shareability element. Are there things that you can do to maybe increase potential of earned? I think about like Uncle Drew is great because it made people say, is this real? Is like, what the heck? Can I believe my eyes? Like this old man is playing basketball at a really high level, and then there's a reveal, right? We used to say like, make them cry, make them laugh, or make them ask, is this real? I wonder if you have advice to increase potential for some of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think everyone always wants ways to sort of like game the algorithm or get ahead of it, right? And I think that people overestimate how much the algorithm wants something and underestimates how much people want something. Because the algorithm is just a mirror, right? It's looking for signals that people found something worth spending time with or sharing. So really what we tell people is, instead of asking, how do we make the algorithm happy? We should say, why would a person stop for this? Why would they send it to a friend? Why would they watch it twice? And I think most of that work actually happens before we think about the editing, right? Is there an interesting tension? Is there a payoff worth waiting for? Does it make someone feel smart or funny or emotional or informed if they share it? And then if those things are true, then the hook and the pacing and the editing, those are amplifiers, right? It's not the idea itself. Those are things that take an idea to a different level, right? Because I do think that people often think that virality is an editing style, but it's usually an observation people couldn't resist passing along that happened to be wrapped in a good style.
I love that. So the stylistic components are table stakes, but the idea is still the primary driver.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk a little bit about agency models. Because AI is making things that used to take a long time so fast. The idea of billing on hours, when you can generate 50 taglines in 1 second with AI, and then edit them and spend time on them. A lot of modern creative studios are moving away from the traditional monthly retainers in favor of high velocity project sprints or revenue share models. As you scale with modern Logic, how do you structure your client engagement so you can move at the speed of internet culture, but not get bogged down by legacy corporate scopes of work?
That's a good question. Oh, it's a good question to ask a creative strategist. I would say that I don't think that the internet moves too fast for retainers, but I think a lot of times retainers move too slowly for the internet. I think one of the biggest shifts that we've made is trying to organize around decisions instead of deliverables. So instead of 12 posts, 2 videos, a strategy deck, it's more like, hey, here's the problem we're trying to solve. And sometimes that means sprint work, sometimes that means longer partnerships. I think we're less interested in selling a fixed amount of work and more interested in creating a rhythm where good ideas can happen before the moment passes.
That's cool. So kind of, a structure in which you can be monitoring culture, monitoring the brand, pitching ideas to them, and hopefully getting answers quickly so you can execute.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Allan, so fun to reconnect and to spend some time, reminiscing about some of the work that we did back in the early days of internet virality.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dylan.
Yeah, man. Have been really impressed with your career and being able to follow along. So glad I was able to, it's great to hear your name come through my email and then get to have this conversation. So if folks want to continue to maybe download that paper that you guys put out about the death of the follower, or follow along with your continued thought leadership, learn more about the agency, where would you like to send people to stay in touch and learn more?
Yeah, just MDRNlogic.com, modernlogic.com.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you. And for those of you at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening, an honest review on whatever podcast platform you might be listening on would be a great help to us to find a larger organic audience. So go ahead and hit that 5-star button if you would. And last but not least, if there's a brand out there that's trying to get smarter at responding to social at the speed of culture, maybe think about the idea of how do you turn your marketing into entertainment, or make it more entertaining at least, versus just featureless and stopping people when they're trying to get to content that they actually want to see. Or maybe at the end of the day, just would maybe get some value from hearing the conversation that I had with Allan today. Don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will wish you a great day. Thanks.